Nestled in the quiet town of Easton, Connecticut, is one of the most haunted cemeteries in America, an historic burial ground that has been the site of countless eerie encounters. Home to a legendary apparition, Union Cemetery is a place where the veil between the living and the dead feels almost tangible. So let's take a trip down I-95 as we explore some of the chilling stories and mysterious sightings that have made this a focal point for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers alike. Why? Because it's extremely strange. Union Cemetery, located in Easton, Connecticut, is one of the most famous haunted locations in the United States. Established in the 18th century, this cemetery is not just a resting place for the deceased, but is also reputed to be home to several spirits. Union Cemetery has a rich history dating back to the early 1700s. Originally serving as a burial ground for local families, it has since become an iconic part of Easton, known for its eerie atmosphere and spectral sightings. The cemetery's age and the numerous people buried there contribute to its haunted reputation. Over the centuries, the cemetery has been the final resting place for many, some of whom are believed to still linger in spirit form. While the exact origins of the cemetery's hauntings remain unclear, several theories suggest that the restless spirits could be tied to tragic events or unfulfilled lives. The cemetery is also in close proximity to Stepney Cemetery in Monroe, another site famous for paranormal activity, leading some to believe that the entire area might be a hotspot for supernatural occurrences. The White Lady is the most well-known ghost associated with Union Cemetery. Described as a spectral woman in a white dress, she has been spotted by many visitors and locals alike. Her appearance is often accompanied by a sense of coldness and dread, and she is usually seen either hovering over the graves or walking along the nearby roads. There are several theories about who the White Lady might have been in life. Some believe she was a woman who died tragically in the area, possibly as the result of a car accident or even foul play. Others speculate that she could be the spirit of a mother searching for her lost child. Despite the numerous sightings, no definitive evidence has been found to confirm her identity, adding to the mystery surrounding her. Over the years, countless people have reported seeing the White Lady. These accounts vary in detail, but many share common elements that lend a level of credibility to the existence of this ghostly figure. One of the most well-documented encounters occurred in the 1990s, when a local fireman was driving near the cemetery late at night. He claimed to have seen a woman in a white dress standing in the middle of the road. Believing she was a living person, he swerved to avoid hitting her, only to realize that she had vanished into thin air. This encounter was so disturbing that the firefighter reported it to the local authorities. Given his credibility as a public servant, his account was taken seriously, and the incident further fueled the legend of the White Lady. This story has been recounted in several books and articles, and it remains one of the most frequently cited examples of an encounter with her. Another compelling account comes from Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigators who studied Union Cemetery extensively. They claim to have captured the White Lady on film during one of their investigations. Although the footage is grainy, the Warrens were convinced that it provided evidence of the White Lady's existence. Their involvement brought national attention to Union Cemetery and solidified its reputation as a haunted location. During another of their visits, the Warrens claimed to have captured photographic evidence of her. They set up cameras around the cemetery, particularly focusing on areas where sightings had been reported. In one photograph, a faint ghostly figure in white can be seen hovering near a grave. The Warrens were convinced that this was the White Lady, and they used the photograph as part of their evidence when discussing Union Cemetery in lectures and media appearances. Although the photograph is also grainy, it has been widely circulated in the paranormal community and is often referenced as proof of the White Lady's existence. Another well-known encounter involved a truck driver who was passing by Union Cemetery late one night. As he approached, he saw a woman in a white dress standing by the side of the road, appearing distressed. Concerned, he slowed down, intending to offer assistance. However, as he got closer, the woman seemed to glide across the road and vanish into the cemetery without a trace. Shaken, the driver continued on his way, but later learned that he wasn't the first person to see the White Lady in that area. A local couple visiting Union Cemetery one evening had their own encounter with her. They were walking along the cemetery paths, enjoying the quiet atmosphere, when they suddenly noticed a figure in white moving between the gravestones. At first, they thought it was another visitor, but as they watched, the figure seemed to glide above the ground and pass through a solid tombstone. The couple froze in place, realizing that what they were seeing was not of this world. The apparition continued to move through the cemetery, eventually disappearing into the darkness. The couple quickly left, deeply unsettled by the experience. A photographer who was visiting the cemetery to capture images of the old gravestones reported a chilling encounter with the White Lady. While setting up his camera near a particularly old section of the cemetery, he noticed a figure in a white dress standing off in the distance. Thinking it might make for an interesting shot, he quickly focused his camera and snapped the picture. However, when he looked up from his camera, the figure was gone. Confused, he checked the photo he had just taken, and to his surprise, the figure did not appear in the image. Despite this, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen something unusual. Later, when he developed the rest of his photos, he noticed a strange mist in several of the images, which wasn't visible at the time. The photographer remains convinced that he had a close encounter with the White Lady. A school bus driver who often drove past Union Cemetery on his route reported seeing the White Lady on multiple occasions. His first sighting happened early one morning as he was driving along Stepney Road. He saw a woman in white standing by the side of the road near the cemetery, seemingly lost or in some form of distress. When he slowed down to get a better look, she disappeared before his eyes. After that initial sighting, the driver claimed to have seen her several more times over the years, always in the same area. These repeated encounters led him to believe that the woman is a spirit bound to the cemetery and the surrounding area. A paranormal enthusiast who had heard about the White Lady decided to visit Union Cemetery at night, hoping to experience something supernatural. Armed with a camera and a digital recorder, he spent several hours walking through the cemetery. As he was about to leave, he suddenly felt a cold breeze pass by, even though the night had been calm and still. Turning around, he saw a faint figure of a woman in white standing near one of the older graves. The figure seemed to shimmer in the moonlight before slowly fading away. He managed to capture an audio recording during the encounter, which contained unexplained static and what he believed to be a faint voice saying, "Help me." The enthusiast left the cemetery convinced he had encountered a White Lady and that she might be a restless spirit seeking assistance. One of the more frequently reported phenomena at Union Cemetery is the sighting of what appears to be candlelight flickering among the graves. Visitors have described seeing these lights late at night, moving as though carried by an unseen hand. These lights often appear in areas of the cemetery where no modern light sources are present, and they have been known to vanish suddenly when approached. One such encounter involved a group of friends who were exploring the cemetery after dark and noticing what looked like the glow of a candle in the distance. Thinking it might be another visitor, they walked toward the light, but as they got closer, the light disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. Despite searching the area, they couldn't find any trace of the source of the light, and the experience left them feeling very uneasy. Floating orbs of light are another common sight. These orbs are often seen hovering near the ground or moving slowly among the tombstones. They are typically described as small glowing balls of light, ranging in color from white to blue or even reddish hues. In another instance, a visitor walking through the cemetery at dusk saw a bright blue orb floating a few feet above the ground. The orb moved slowly as if it were inspecting the gravestones, before suddenly darting off into the trees and disappearing. The visitor described the encounter as both beautiful and eerie, as the orb seemed almost sentient. A more intense and unsettling experience with lights was reported by a local resident who drove past the Union Cemetery one night. As they approached the cemetery, they noticed bright flashes of light coming from within the graveyard, almost like a series of camera flashes. Concerned that someone might be in trouble, they pulled over and walked toward the source of the light. As they entered the cemetery, the flashing stopped, leaving the area in complete darkness. The residents searched for any signs of people or activity, but found nothing. When they returned to their car, the flashing resumed behind them, this time accompanied by a strange electrical humming sound. Terrified, the resident left the area quickly, later describing the experience as one of the most bizarre and frightening moments of their life. Some visitors have reported seeing what appears to be an old-fashioned lantern light moving through the cemetery, especially on foggy nights. This light is often described as a dim yellowish glow, as if someone were walking through the cemetery holding one. Some encounters with lights at Union Cemetery are tied to sightings of the White Lady herself. Several witnesses have reported seeing a soft glowing light surrounding her, almost as if she were illuminated from within. This light often appears to be a faint ethereal glow that fades as she moves or disappears. In another incident, a security guard patrolling the area around the cemetery late at night noticed what he thought were flashlights moving through the cemetery. Concerned that trespassers might be vandalizing the graves, he entered to investigate. As he approached, the light seemed to move away from him, staying just out of reach. Despite searching the entire area, the guard couldn't find anyone or any source for the lights. He described them as small white lights that seemed to hover just above the ground. After several minutes, the lights vanished completely. Encounters with shadowy figures at Union Cemetery are some of the most unsettling experiences reported by visitors and paranormal investigators. These figures are often described as dark, human-like shapes that seem to move with purpose, yet they lack any discernible features. One of the earliest and most well-known encounters with a shadowy figure at the cemetery involved a local man who was visiting a family grave late one afternoon. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, he noticed a dark figure standing near a large oak tree. The figure was tall and seemed to be watching him, but it had no distinguishable face or clothing, just a dark human-like shape. The man called out thinking it might be another visitor, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to move slowly toward him. As it approached, the air around the man grew noticeably colder, and he was overcome with a sense of dread. Before the figure could reach him, the man hurriedly left the cemetery, feeling as though he had narrowly avoided something malevolent. Another chilling encounter involving a security guard was the night he was making his rounds near the entrance gate, and noticed a shadowy figure standing just inside the cemetery gates. The figure was tall and seemed to be staring directly at him, though its face was indistinguishable. The guard approached thinking it might be someone trespassing, but as he drew nearer, the figure began to retreat into the cemetery. The guard followed, but the figure moved deeper into the shadows and eventually disappeared behind a row of gravestones. The guard searched the area but found no one. One of the more terrifying encounters with a shadowy figure occurred just outside the cemetery on Stepney Road. A couple was driving past late at night when they saw a dark figure standing in the middle of the road. The figure was completely black with no discernible features, and it appeared to be about 6 feet tall. The driver slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting the figure, but just as the car was about to make contact, the shadowy figure vanished into thin air. The couple was left shaken and confused, unsure of what they had just seen. One particularly frightening encounter occurred when a visitor to Union Cemetery decided to explore a small old mausoleum near the back of the property. As he approached, he noticed a shadowy figure standing just inside the entrance. The figure was tall and completely black with no visible features. The visitor hesitated, unsure whether to enter, but as he stood there, the figure slowly turned and seemed to sink into the floor, disappearing from sight. Despite being in broad daylight, the experience left the visitor feeling cold and unnerved. Encounters with strange mists at the cemetery contribute to the eerie atmosphere of the site. These mists are often described as fog-like orbs of mist that suddenly appear and seem to have a supernatural quality. A local resident reported seeing a strange mist while walking through the cemetery one morning. As she approached the older section, she noticed a dense white mist hanging low to the ground. The mist was thick and seemed to be swirling, even though there was no wind to move it. The resident described the mist as having a ghostly, almost sentient quality. It appeared to move in a way that seemed to follow her as she walked, and she felt a chill in the air as she passed through it. The mist eventually dissipated as she left the cemetery, but the encounter left her feeling unsettled. There have been several reports of strange mists appearing around the White Lady. In one notable encounter, a visitor to the cemetery saw the White Lady appearing to glide through a dense, swirling mist. It seemed to follow her as she moved, and it created a glowing halo effect around her figure. Another spirit that has been reported is known as the red-eyed ghost. This entity is said to have glowing red eyes and a menacing presence. It is often spotted near the back of the cemetery where the older graves are located. Some witnesses have described feeling an overwhelming sense of fear and dread when encountering this spirit, leading some to speculate that it might be a more malevolent entity. During one of the ghost tours that visit Union Cemetery, the tour guide reported that a few guests saw red eyes in the distance while the guide was explaining the history of the White Lady. The guide had not seen the eyes themselves, but noticed that the guests became visibly unsettled and asked to leave the area immediately. After the tour, the guests described seeing what looked like glowing red eyes watching them from the tree line, which made them feel incredibly uneasy. Some locals believe that the red-eyed ghost might be a guardian of the cemetery, a spirit that protects the graves from trespassers or those with ill intentions. This theory comes from stories where individuals who tried to vandalize the cemetery reported seeing the red eyes staring at them from the darkness, often accompanied by a feeling of intense fear. These individuals often fled the cemetery in terror, abandoning their plans. Exploring alternate explanations for the phenomena reported at Union Cemetery can help provide a broader perspective on these experiences. Many seemingly paranormal occurrences have natural or psychological explanations that might account for the observed phenomena. So here are some possible alternate explanations for those various phenomena reported at the cemetery. Shadowy figures may be caused by optical illusions, where the play of light and shadow creates shapes that resemble human figures. The interplay of moonlight, ambient light, and shadows from trees or tombstones can contribute to these illusions. The human mind is predisposed to recognizing patterns, especially faces or human-like shapes, even in ambiguous stimuli. This phenomenon, known as pareidolia, could explain why people see shadowy figures where none exist. And sometimes shadowy figures might be animals, such as deer or raccoons moving through the cemetery, or other people who are not immediately visible due to the darkness. The appearance of strange mists could be due to natural fog or low-lying clouds, especially in areas with high humidity or temperature differentials between day and night. Mist can form when the air cools rapidly, causing moisture to condense near the ground. This phenomenon can be more pronounced in areas with old gravestones and tombs that absorb heat differently from the surrounding ground. Certain environmental factors, like the decomposition of organic materials or specific soil conditions, can create vapor or mist-like effects. Small particles of dust, pollen, or insects close to the camera lens can reflect light sources and appear as orbs in photographs. This is a common explanation for the appearance of them in paranormal photography. Digital cameras and flash photography can sometimes create artifacts that look like floating orbs. These artifacts can be caused by lens flares, reflections, or the camera's sensor reacting to bright light sources. Variances in air pressure, temperature, and humidity can cause light to scatter in unusual ways, creating the appearance of orbs or floating lights. Headlights or taillights from vehicles passing near the cemetery can sometimes create reflections or illusions of light within the cemetery itself. Nearby sources of light pollution from street lamps, buildings, or other urban areas can create illusions or reflections that appear as strange lights within the cemetery. Objects within the cemetery, such as reflective grave markers or statues, might catch and reflect light in unusual ways, creating the appearance of mysterious lights. People might mistake ordinary individuals, especially those dressed in white or light-colored clothing, for the White Lady. This misidentification can be more likely in low-light conditions. The power of suggestion and influence of local legends can lead people to interpret ordinary events as supernatural. Expectations based on stories and folklore can shape how people perceive their experiences. Union Cemetery is a place where history and legend intertwines. The numerous eyewitness accounts of ghostly encounters, including that of the White Lady, have solidified its reputation as one of the most haunted locations in the United States. And while skeptics may question the validity of these stories, the consistency and number of reports suggest that something truly unexplainable is occurring there. So whether you believe in ghosts or not, the eerie atmosphere and rich history of Union Cemetery make it a fascinating place, shrouded in mystery and the unexplained.